All right, guys, let's do it. Episode number 2 of Sunday Sessions with Moni. And this week we are coming back from the first episode where I shared my journey from first period until hormonal chaos at 35. Talked a little bit about my fertility longevity journey and kind of coming out of a period of overtraining that put me into hormonal chaos and what that journey has looked like up until now. So where we left off last week last episode was talking about the functional testing that I did. And I've talked a little bit over on Instagram about functional testing, and you guys had some questions. So today we're really going to talk about what you should know about functional testing, where to get started, and I'm just going to share my experience. I literally have my protocol from one of mine and my results. So I'm going to share that with you because I think that you will find that fascinating. Functional testing is so fascinating. You can learn so much. One of the things that I like to say is that so often what we maybe think of as the cause of what we're experiencing is honestly a symptom and not a cause. And so we have to go a couple layers deeper. And that is where I find functional testing to be so incredibly amazing, is that we can really piece together how the whole body system is working and what is actually at the root of whether it be hormonal imbalance or gut issues or inflammation, all of those things. So, um, where I want to start and what I want to talk about first is something that I have done annually for probably over 5 years at this point, and that is getting annual lab work done. So this doesn't necessarily need to be functional, but I will say that if you are just doing it through like a lab core or your doctor, OBGYN, they're not going to have functional ranges for your results. So you are going to want to advocate and kind of do a little bit of self-research to understand if your lab work is in those functional ranges, which we'll talk about more for sure, because that was one of the questions that came up. So when I do annual blood work, what I am looking for is to kind of best understand what is quote unquote normal for me. We're all different, but we can start to see patterns. If every year we're noticing, okay, I'm testing my lab work every year in the summer and my vitamin D is low. I can only imagine what it is like in the winter then. So I should be supplementing vitamin D. That's like a great thing to know. You can know what your iron is like. Are you leaning anemic, which for women, really great thing to know. Cholesterol levels, if you have any high cholesterol in your family, heart disease in your family, for me, that is something that is really common. And so I love to know how my cholesterol is trending year over year. You always want to ask to do a full nutrient panel, so you'll get to understand kind of some of the minerals. I think it shows like magnesium and zinc and calcium. B vitamins are usually in there. Vitamin D, always do the vitamin D add-on, especially if you're a female, do that vitamin D add-on. Vitamin D is a hormone. Um, it usually costs a little bit extra, but it's worth it. The other things in there that you can ask for or want to make sure in there are the thyroid markers. So that's like T3, FSH, not FSH, TSH. Anyways, thyroid panel, include the thyroid panel. And then also, I always do it fasting and ask for fasting glucose because that can tell you a lot as well. So I do that every year at the hospital that I go to. You can ask for like what is called quote unquote health fair labs. And I think they're like $99 with the vitamin D add-on. It might be like $120. So I just plan on doing that every year. And I've learned a lot about myself. And that is where things got started this year with me being like, okay, we need to go a little bit deeper. So this year I actually did my lab work through a company called Joy and Blokes. They are an online functional testing platform. Functional is a stretch. I have some opinions about their offer and their telemedicine structure. I'm happy to answer those. I think that it is a great place to get lab work done because they do compare it in functional ranges. They also offer like a lobotomist to come to your house and take your blood work if you live, somewhere that's offered. Or you can just like go to a LabCorp and get it drawn. But they do provide results with functional ranges, so that was really nice because you didn't have to go and do that research. And like I said, because I have a history of understanding my blood work, I was able to see that things were definitely off. And the things that I noticed, if you are watching on YouTube, I will put the test results on screen so you can kind of see the highlights of the areas where things were off. And that was my thyroid markers, low nutrient stores. And cholesterol was higher even than normal. And my cholesterol is typically high. So that was going up more than I wanted to see. And having the background that I have, I know that we need to be making enough cholesterol for our hormones, but it seemed like there was a buildup of cholesterol where it wasn't properly converting because what I was experiencing felt like a low hormonal state. So my symptoms were, things that we talked about last week. I was having PMDD flare-ups, so mood symptoms, low energy, dry skin, brittle nails, brittle hair, very short periods, 23-ish days, a short luteal phase, meaning like from ovulation to when I got my period was less than 10 days, which is not ideal, and then very short bleeds, like 1 day of red blood. So I already knew that there was something going on, but this lab work was very reaffirming that the body was under stress and was not absorbing nutrients. I needed to go deeper. And a lot of practitioners, and this is where I will caution you, would have just seen that lab work, the blood work, which did include some hormone markers. However, blood hormone levels are different than if you get like a Dutch test done, and a Dutch test is preferable. Also, I will say, even with blood work, you may want to be testing at a certain time in your cycle. We're gonna talk about all that. But so I knew that I needed to go deeper. So some doctors will see that kind of lab work and just immediately be like, oh, great, nutrients are low, just supplement. Okay. In this instance, the low nutrients is a symptom and not a root cause. If you know that that is not typical for you, then just supplementing isn't necessarily going to fix what else is going on. Will it make you feel better? And is it something that you probably need to do to get your stores back up? Yes. Is that going to fix the problem? Probably not. And I say this as a owner of a supplement company. Like, supplements can make you feel better. And that is amazing. And that is where I started in my journey too, was needing replenishment. But then it takes the work of also fixing the root of why you're not absorbing these nutrients and why you're not able to fully utilize them. So I decided that my next step was a GI map. That is a stool test, a poop test, and it gives you the most amazing results. If you are like, I feel like I have gut issues and I need to do a stool test, and you go to your doctor and they're not using a GI map, there's a lot more you can learn. There's like other stool tests out there are far less superior than the GI map. The GI map isn't just going to give you data and then your doctor is going to be like, great, take a probiotic. No, it's going to show you so many things like pathogens. It's going to show you good bacteria, bad bacteria. Here we go. I have the results right here. So let's actually look. candida and yeast, parasites, intestinal health markers. So those are things like how bile flow is going, if your pancreas has enough digestive enzymes, beta glucuronidase. Sorry, I'm going to butcher some of these words, which this is that's one of the indicators of if you're recirculating estrogen. One of the other ones, it shows inflammation. So if you're having like gut wall permeability and issues, so it really, it can also tell you like if you're gluten intolerant, it goes deep, and then you're able to say, okay, my issue isn't a bacterial issue in the gut. It's actually like an intestinal wall issue. It's an inflammation issue. It's a bile issue. So I'm not digesting well. It's very fascinating. Needless to say, that was my decision because I had low nutrient absorption, but a good diet, inflammation, fatigue, and then high cholesterol. So it was kind of like, something's not converting right. I'm not getting the nutrients I need to be able to convert the cholesterol into the hormones I need. So the hardest part, like I was talking about, is finding a practitioner that can understand functional ranges. And when I say functional ranges, this is what I mean. A functional range is something that means that your system is working optimally, as opposed to a normal range, which is based off of averages in the population, which the average person in our population is sick. So we want people to be working off of functional ranges, because if you are suboptimal, that means you're like subclinical. That means they wouldn't necessarily diagnose you with X, Y, and Z, but you're headed in that direction. So we can find issues before they become massive issues where you're like needing to medicate on it. You can tweak, and even when you are suboptimal, subnormal, you may be symptomatic from that. So you're able to catch things before they're in those ranges where you've gone too far. Here are a few questions that I would ask to find a qualified practitioner who can run functional tests. So I would ask, what do you base your lab ranges off from? And this is trying to determine if they use normal lab ranges or functional. Most lab cores will give you results compared to a normal range. And honestly, each lab core destination will give you different ranges. There isn't a standard. So we really want to be working off of functional ranges. I would ask, do you plan to test, and do you test with your patients at a certain point in their cycle? For some of these tests, it does not matter. The GI map, it does not matter. You just poop and send it in. It does not matter what day your cycle. For others, it does matter. So a Dutch test means nothing if it's not tested at specific points in your cycle, depending on what you're testing for. For most people menstruating, and wanting to understand hormonal levels, you'll test mid-luteal phase. For me, I tested mid-luteal phase because I was kind of leaning towards testing from a fertility standpoint. And then I would ask, what could a potential protocol look like? What you're looking for this answer to be with a practitioner is that they would include a full review of your test results, that they would include a nutrition protocol, so like diet improvements and suggestions, a lifestyle protocol, so this will be in relation to sleep, stress, and exercise, and then a supplement protocol. That's what I would be looking for them to answer. You really want the full picture because that's what's going to be effective. I personally worked with a functional dietitian. She was a dietitian by training, but she had also done functional training. So dietitians are people with a nutritional background with the most training. They are literally almost a doctor, but traditional dietitian training does not mean they are trained in functional medicine or from a functional lens. So they will likely have had to have done an added on training or additional training to be functional. They don't have to be a dietitian for them to be able to run functional labs with you. You can work with a nutritional therapy practitioner or a certified nutrition practitioner. There are a couple of different certifications that do train people specifically in functional lab testing that are really good. You don't have to be a doctor to be trained in this. I would not work with a standard doctor. I would not work with an OBGYN or a doctor who has not been through any kind of functional training. I would literally ask them, can you read a GI map? Can you read a Dutch test? Do you know how to run an HTMA test? I would ask those questions, and if they aren't comfortable reading those results, they won't run them for you. Okay, so let's take a look at my GI map. I decided to do a GI map and a Dutch test. We're just going to talk about the GI map today. That was where my protocol started, and I think what you guys will find most interesting. So, honestly, my Dutch test wasn't that interesting, but let's talk about the GI map. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to put results on the screen so you can actually see, and you'll be able to see the functional ranges and all of that, which will be very cool. First up, that was a standout, was H. pylori. So H. pylori is, and I'm going to read this off here. This is from a dietitian. H. pylori is a bacteria linked to gastric ulcers, gastric cancer, and heartburn, and it damages the cells in your stomach that produce gastric acid, making your stomach less acidic and affects digestion and makes you more susceptible to pathogens. So I did have a small amount of H. pylori, but it didn't really appear to be affecting digestion. Although, I don't know, now that we've gone through the protocol and kind of healed this, I would maybe think differently. We did decide to treat it because I also had very low stomach acid, which we did through like a very basic baking soda test. It's like literally a burp test. So my stomach acid was low, and then my partner at the same time was going through and doing a GI map as well because he was dealing with some digestive issues. And he also had H. pylori present in his test, which you can pass it. The way you pass it is through saliva. So we both decided to treat it, and yeah, that's why we decided to treat it. So my good bacteria was honestly like fine. There was a little bit of room for improvement, so we worked on it a little bit. And then my bad bacteria there was no overgrowth. So that's often in the area where you're like, what you think of most when you think of gut health is you're like, oh, I'll just take a probiotic and like fix the good gut bugs and get rid of the bad ones. So there was nothing really going on for me with that. I did have a small amount of parasites in my poop. So we worked through helping my body clear this by supporting some of the other areas that we were already going to support, which was immune function and then beneficial bacteria and overall digestion. No candida or yeast, which is great. I had high, I can't pronounce this, steatocrite. So these are my intestinal health markers, and this is kind of where things were looking a little iffy, and we could tell that there was like some immune system dysfunction as well as some bile, which that is like stomach acid and what helps us digest things, break things down. So steatocrite was high, which means that my body needed more support with liver and bile flow. My beta glucuronidase was low, which was good because that meant that there wasn't a recirculation of estrogen, which I wasn't surprised by this. A lot of people have estrogen dominance. Both my estrogen and my progesterone are like low normal. So I didn't think that that was going to be a problem. I didn't have any blood in my stool, which is great. Secretary IgA, this was low, with a pattern of deficiency. So this is like an immune marker, immune inflammation marker. And again, this wasn't surprising coming out of a season of chronic stress and overtraining. This was not a surprise to me or my dietitian, knowing what the last year had looked like for me, but it needed to be supported. My body does great with gluten, which we celebrated for sure. And then a couple things, caloprectin, borderline high, could be due to the parasite or overtraining. So just like stress in the body. Zonulin, borderline high, indicating some intestinal permeability. So intestinal permeability is like, you might hear that and you would think leaky gut. So that kind of situation. So what did we do? What was the protocol, the plan? So I had a multi-phased protocol. And what we did first was we really wanted to focus on supporting the immune system and digestion. Oh, one of the things that we didn't talk about, which was maybe on this page. Sorry to go back here, but I had a very high amount of fat in my stool, which means that my body was not properly breaking down fat. My digestion was bad. So we wanted to support digestion and support immune system. So by doing both of those things, we were hopeful that I was going to be able to uptake more of the nutrients that I wasn't getting, and overall just be able to fight some of these pathogens a little bit better. So for work first on immune system support, we did a couple of things. Focused on continuing to eat at least 30 grams of protein per meal, mixing in complex carbs, nuts and seeds, whole grains, legumes, and fruits and vegetables. So balanced meal, great. Aiming for 30 plant points per week. And so this is what something my dietitian does is calls them plant points. And that is just making sure you're getting a wide variety of different plants in your diet. And that really helps with getting a bunch of different micronutrients and introducing different fibers and nutrients to the gut. And then 3 servings of fermented foods every day, which was really hard for me, like really hard. So these are things like yogurt, kefir, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, tempeh, and apple cider vinegar. I leaned heavily on apple cider vinegar, yogurt, and then sauerkraut. But I would say I didn't do a great job at this. Oh, one of the other things that I did was pickles, but not just like a shitty jar of pickles, like the ones that have to be refrigerated. I honestly don't know if that counts, but I counted it in my head because they're like in vinegar. So that was a diet and nutrition. Like I said, I believe myself to have a pretty balanced diet to begin with. So that wasn't a lot of change for me. I'd say the biggest thing was the fermented foods. We also did add in some natural foods that can help support decrease H. pylori. H. pylori was actually, removing H. pylori was actually phase 2, but we started these foods in phase 1. So some of these foods were like consuming green tea during the day, unsweetened cranberry juice, oregano, thyme, and cinnamon, and then broccoli sprouts and microgreens. So that was pretty easy. I did cranberry juice in my Sleepy Girl mocktails. I added green tea in occasionally, and I always put microgreens on things. So pretty easy. I was just a little bit more mindful of that. On the lifestyle side, it was reducing intense cardio because what we noticed was that there was a high level of stress in my body. So we removed cardio that was more than 20 minutes a day. I'd say I kept it under like 30 minutes. Lots of rest and relaxation, making sure that I was getting high quality sleep every night, daily gratitude practice to improve the secretory IgA. So that is like the immune part, which is wild, but yes, it actually does help. And then daily grounding for 5 to 10 minutes, which can also decrease inflammation and improve leaky gut. When they say this in all of these Instagram posts and whenever you hear like grounding, meditation, all of that, it actually works. Yeah. It's literally in my protocol. And I did it and it works. And then there is supplements. So the supplement protocol is intense, but I will say I did phase 1 and then I did phase 2, and the results are pretty incredible. I feel way better. I'm not exhausted in the middle of the day, performing way better all around. My periods have lengthened. Ovulation markers are much stronger. Yeah, overall, it's like pretty incredible. So what was in the supplement protocol? I did have a probiotic that I took in the evening. So we were just trying to lightly support improving those good gut bacteria. Although they were good, they could have been better. So we were supporting that. We were doing bee propolis. So that's like the Beekeeper's Natural spray. That was for immune health. SBI Protect is a colostrum, but it's way better than Armora. Armora is total shit. Do not buy it. SBI Protect is like the purest form of colostrum that you can get, as well as in a dosage that is very supportive. So I was on a high dose of that, which I take pretty regularly throughout the year, just as a general immune thing. Tudka helps with liver detoxification and bile flow, so I was on that. Ox bile, digestive enzyme, I was taking that with food because I was having a hard time breaking down fat. And that can help kind of, while the gut is healing, help it do that process. So with food, I was doing ox bile, digestive enzyme. Then a omega-3, a prenatal, which I was alternating a prenatal with Marea, and vitamin D K2. So that was phase 1, which I did for 4 or 5 weeks. And then for 6 weeks after that, I continued that protocol, but added in 2 supplements that helped remove H. pylori. And so we'd improved immune system and digestion, and then moved on to kind of killing off some of the pathogens in the system. So it was overall like a 3-month protocol. I'm feeling way, way better, and I am amazed. I think functional testing is something that everyone should have access to. Gonna jump in a little bit to like Q&A because I did have a couple of questions over on Instagram from people about functional testing. One of the ones that I got often was who I worked with. So like I said, I worked with a functional dietitian. Her name is Anna Brown. She's currently on maternity leave, but hopefully will be back by the end of the year. So definitely look her up. How to find a practitioner. It is hard. Honestly, I'd say like search Instagram, which sounds awful, but most of them work remotely, and it's pretty easy to work remotely with someone if you want to do testing. We are also going to launch functional testing as an offer at Marea. We are doing this literally because so many people have come to me and been like, I don't know how to find someone. The person I tested with did this, this, and this, and they're all red flags. And I want women to be able to access to understand what the root cause of what they're experiencing is. Another question was about the HTMA test, which is hair tissue mineral analysis, and what my thoughts were. I personally have not done this test, but a lot of the practitioners that we work with, that I know, do use this test with their patients. And it can be a really good one for understanding heavy metal toxicity and any kind of like toxin exposure. So I think it is a great thing. It just depends on what symptoms you're having and if it sounds like the right test for you. Another person in the community asked, I'm experiencing inflammation and low nutrient stores. What would you suggest? So that's basically what I was seeing. And the GI map was really informative and helpful. I would probably want a little bit more of an understanding of exactly what you're experiencing or why you think it's inflammation. But I would probably lean towards GI map. And then someone asked, how do I find out functional ranges? You can try Googling it. FullScript does have functional ranges that they offer kind of to their practitioners. Honestly, I looked at them and like the thyroid markers were still pretty wide. If it's a thyroid thing, I would definitely like listen to a podcast with McCall McPherson on it of Modern Thyroid Clinic. We've had her on our podcast, but work with a practitioner. Work with a practitioner. I will say one hack that I have used, and you cannot totally rely on it. ChatGPT is not a doctor or a trained practitioner, but I have fed my lab results and my testing results into ChatGPT and asked it, like, what would you say would be functional versus what we're seeing on these results? And it can be helpful. It can be helpful, but use it with a grain of salt. Okay, that is all functional testing that I'm going to talk about for today. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm so excited that we are working on launching something in this area at Maria. And I hope that if you have any questions, you'll definitely reach out and ask. There are a lot of amazing practitioners who you can work with. It is an investment. Oftentimes it is not covered by insurance, but it will get you answers and it will help you feel better as long as you're willing to stick to the protocol. So thanks for coming back, joining me and chatting with me today. We will see you next time and have a great one.